At this time, I would really like to shift it over to a few folks in the room to help kick us off. I'm excited to be facilitating and helping lead some of this, but we've got some really great folks in the room who have played with CAST, who have used it for their own district, that are going to speak to their experience and how it can benefit districts, and then introduce our key speaker from DEQ. So at this time, I want to pass it over to Amy Walker with DCR and Wayne Davis, our Vice President and a Director in Colonial Soil and Water District. Amy, I know you helped Colonial with something very similar to this, and would love for you to frame our presentation today and give districts a little background.
Good morning. For those I may not have met, my name is Amy Walker. I'm the Eastern Area Regional Manager, and my office is out of Tappahannock. This came about due to needing to see progress of BMP implementation over time. And as we progress closer to 2025, districts, directors, and producers are asking more often to see how they're doing, how they're progressing towards the Bay goals. There's been an increased emphasis on cost share dollars for BMPs. We're going to see additional cost share dollars pushing out this year. And so implementation is really hitting the ground running. Usually when you are receiving information about the Bay model, often all you're seeing is where we need to go, how much more we need to do, the various sectors, especially agriculture, the targets that we still need to hit. And it's rare that you see how much you've actually done. And for some of the work that I needed to do, I wanted to see the progress of BMP implementation over time, especially compared against the 2017 goals that most districts received back in late 2017, early 2018. And so as we move forward, as cost share dollars increase, it's just going to be more of an emphasis. And it was also something tangible that you could show directors, that you could show producers, and even in, for some localities, the progress that the district has made over the years towards the WIP goal. Up on the screen, there's a couple of slides, and this just is to give you an idea of some of the information that you can pull for your district. And the information that you can see, you can pull it for 1 year, you can pull it for multiple, but it just seemed to be extremely helpful. And originally I contacted DEQ to have the information pulled for me because CAST is known to be a beast. And I was surprised. They said, well, we'll just show you how to do it yourself. Just how easy it was. If you know what you're looking for and you know the specific information to input, it's really quite easy to pull some really good information for your own specific district. So once we realized how easy that was, the next step was, of course, to try to teach the districts, give them some information on CAST so they could pull those reports themselves to utilize as they see fit. What you see right now is a view of progress over time. And this was against the 2017 milestone tables that the most districts got. Wanted to see what areas they needed to target and how BMP implementation was progressing over time. And so you'll see in the 2017, there's a bunch of zeros for nutrient rate placement and timing. And we knew that was not necessarily correct. This could be just either cost share dollars were low, something happened with the weather, or the BMP data just wasn't quite implemented. And then you see it really starts to ratchet and ramp up 2018, 2019, and 2020 as data collection improved. Next slide. And you can also see the percentage of how close you're getting to your WIP3 goals. The WIP3 official version numbers, that is what is needed each year to hit the target. So you would need 80% of your agricultural acres. This district was able to, through data capture, hit 91% of nutrient management planning. The core nitrogen, core phosphorus is nutrient management planning. And so you can see they exceeded that. And so now they can move on and target some of the other areas they may need to hit in order to get closer to some of their goals. Next slide. I know the numbers are tiny. The point isn't to try to read them. This is just an example of what you are going to see in your table. This is what it's going to look like. if you run a multiple scenarios. So that's all this is for, is just to take a look and also to show you it's more than just nutrient management. This is everything in CAST. Once you pull that data, you'll see nutrient management all the way down to oyster implementation. And so this is all the data that is in CAST. So this is just an example of some of what you'll see. And next slide. And same thing, this is hitting percentages, and you can use it to see targets you may need to address. The numbers are tiny, but they're doing really well on residue tillage. And so now they need to push up and try to implement more cover crop or get more people enrolled. And so that's it for my part. It was just, this is such useful data. It's easy to pull out of CAST once you get the steps. And then as we're moving forward towards 2025, more districts are asking to see their progress. Like, how can they see that as particularly specific to their locality or their district area? And so that led to Colonial.
Yeah, I'm Wayne Davis. Glad to be here this morning. I'll just make a few brief comments and then we'll start with the speaker from DEQ. Going back to Colonial, one of the things that I recognize at our district, we have 7 new directors out of 12. And with COVID and all the issues associated with that, it really slowed down the process of them learning, what the cost share program was about. They would hear different committee reports from the Ag Committee. We're putting these BMPs in here, we're doing this, we're doing that. Our allocation is going to be this. And I could just see a puzzled look especially from a lot of the new ones. And again, you got to keep in mind, a lot of this, or most of it, was done during Zoom. So I felt like we needed to bring in somebody to go over where we stood at Colonial with our 4 counties as it relates to the progress report and the water quality goals in 2025. So Amy, and we reached out, Jim Wallace and I reached out to Amy, and she came and did a wonderful job. And even since she's been there, a lot of the new directors still have questions, but Jim and I and others are able to answer most of those. If we don't, we call Amy or Blair or somebody from DCR. But I think the take-home message is we don't want a lot of surprises when 2025 does get here. And it seems like it may be a ways off, but that date is fast approaching us. And what we want to do at DCR and the association and other conservation agencies is position all of y'all to succeed. And if we need to make some adjustments in the suite of BMPs that we signed up for when we first undertook this process, now's the time to start doing that and put greater resources in other areas. For example, Amy and I had a conversation yesterday about bundling BMPs, and it seems to be going over real well. I think you're going to hear a little bit more about it maybe later this morning. But that's something that I told her I think would be very receptive in association areas 3 and 6, especially with the farmers and the type of row crops that they raise. So with that, I reckon I would close and say that I would strongly encourage each of the districts, if you think it'd be a good use of your time, to either your Ag Committee or your entire board, let your appropriate district staffer or DCR person come in and go over the progress report for your district and go through it and let people ask questions and see where y'all are and kind of get a report card. So, are we halfway there? Are we a third way there? Have we put in all the filter strips that we need to do, drop structures or whatever it may be? And then that way you can, when we get these additional monies coming out of the upcoming General Assembly, you can better forecast which BMPs you want to promote, plus where the staff can put their emphasis with their farmers. Because that's, for example, nutrient management, Amy, we really got to have more acreage under nutrient management, is my understanding. So with that said, you really need to be promoting that, your staff. So that's the way I look at this session today, is learn how to use CAST, learn it is an effective tool, but you're not out there alone. There's plenty of help. And we found Amy to be very helpful. And we feel like at Colonial, we know where we need to go between now and 2025.
Can you put the one slide back up real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Just in reference to what Wayne was saying. So when you look at the slide, this what you're seeing is the result of a bundled practice, because in 2017, seeing all those zeros, the producers were made aware, and they know that they were doing more than zeros with split application, variable rate, multiple splits. And so the problem was, how do we get this into the Bay model? And that was one of the precursors for developing the whole farm approach bundled practice. And so what you're seeing from 2017, 2018, and then the bump into 2019 was the beginning of the implementation of the whole farm approach. And then 2020, it's in full swing. And so that's, referencing what Wayne was speaking to. If you see an area that you're doing better, the bundling of the practices, providing incentives for producers to come and sit down and talk to you, proved to be extremely effective. And so that's, again, if you were to look at these types of information at your district, you may see something very similar to this, and come forward and talk about it. If there are practices that can be bundled to help capture the information, particularly know if the producers in your area are putting it on the ground, and we just need to figure out the best method and means to feed it to the model.
That's a good overview in terms of how one district has used it and what your own district can learn. At this time, Ariana Johns from DEQ is going to walk us through CAST and how to really be able to use it for your own district. I know you're on mute right now, but hopefully, Ms. Johns, you have ability to screen share, and we are really excited you are with us to take us a deep dive into CAST.
Awesome. So everybody should have gotten that presentation slide deck that I sent out yesterday. That'll be a good reference for in the future. We're just going to go over simply how to do the loads report first, because once you know how to do one report, the rest are done pretty much the same way. So we're going to start by logging in.
You haven't created a login, we hope you had, but we'll gladly send you the link back out when we do our follow-up this afternoon. And when you registered, you had a link on how to get there too.
Yeah. And then it brings you to this scenario screen when you first come in. Where you're going to find your reports is in the results tab. So you come down to reports. There's a whole bunch of different types of reports. I think the loads report and the Bmp Summary Report will probably be the most informative in what you're looking for. But I'm going to go over the loads report first. So. That I don't get lost in them. And you're probably, if you're going to do a lot of reports, I would definitely recommend coming up with a naming convention. Um, 2020 progress. And then y'all are only going to see the public scenarios. If I showed you all the other scenarios, it would probably get you lost because I have a lot of them. Right. And you're going to scroll down to soil and water conservation districts. You can select as many different districts as you want, just as few. So we're going to do Colonial this morning. And you come down to scenarios, goes back all the way to 1985 progress. We're going to come down and do 2020 progress and WIP 3 official. Now you can load up to 20 different scenarios. I don't recommend ever doing that. I did it once. There's way too much data to look at. You're then going to choose your load source aggregations. I think for this one, we'll do minor load sources and sector. Then for agency aggregations, I always do fed versus non-fed. The only agencies that you would see in there, if we were to do the all agencies report, is going to be federal agencies. Everything at the state level is listed as non-fed. So then just checking to make sure that I've entered everything right. Hit submit report. And you'll get an email in under a minute. Usually you come over to download reports, see, and before I was even done with it, it's ready to download. So we can download that report. Having a good grasp on Excel is really important. So I bet you can't see my Excel screen opening up, can you? So stop sharing, start sharing Excel. All right. So when you open up the downloaded report, this is what you're going to be greeted with is some of the base metadata and then you can look at the scenario details to understand even more data that is being used to create these reports. So this is just a small section of some of the data that you can get. You can run these reports and really generate a lot of data. So I always do pivot tables. Just hit Control A from A1 and pivot table. We don't want to add this to a data model. I always start with my geography because I need to know where we are. Then we can look at the different sectors. So you got agriculture, developed, natural, septic, and wastewater. And then we're going to look at the nitrogen loading at the edge of tide for 2020 progress. You just drag and drop. And let's go ahead and look at the WIP for 2020 progress. I always format these cells so I don't have to look at all the decimal points. Make it a little easier to read. Yeah, and then like I said about the fed versus non-fed, I always create a little filter. And that way I can just toggle between the two to see the differences. That is how you run a loads report and get the base information out of it. Let's go ahead and look at the Bmp Summary Report now. All right, go back. Okay, so we're gonna come back here and do the Bmp Summary Report. Bmp Summary. We're still gonna do colonial. Come down to scale. on over. We'll pick 2020 progress and WIP 3 again. This might take a little bit longer to load, but not, it shouldn't be more than a minute at most. The only time I've ever had reports take any amount of time, I was generating quite a massive amount of data. Is there any questions so far? Okay, good. Come on, Bmp Summary. Guess this one's gonna take a minute. There we go. All right. And on this menu, you can also look at the metadata for everything that you put in that query. It's always good to know where your metadata is. Okay. Stop sharing, share. Oops. All right. All right, and here's your Bmp Summary Report where you can come down and see the individual Bmp types, manure transport, the precision feeding, your urban
Ariana,
practices.
if you're trying to screen share right now, I can't see it.
Oh no!
Yeah.
I definitely hit screen share. Okay, sorry. Can you see it now?
We did. Yep.
There you go.
Okay, okay. Been doing these meetings for 2 years like this and still mess it up sometimes. Okay, so this is our Bmp Summary Report. Like was presented earlier, it's the same report. And you can look at the summary Bmp groups. There's just a wealth of information in here. Like this will tell you how the different BMPs are aggregated across the various ways. So you see, our commodity cover crops, or a whole bunch of different types, and then those just filter up to ag practices. But I think the summary Bmp report will probably be the most informative for the districts.
Ariana, I think that's a good point for a question, and it might not be just for you. It might be for Wayne also, who's done this in Colonial. Mr. Director and Prince William has asked, how would you interpret the data in the reports to inform your decision-making to accomplish the district's goals?
Say that again.
How would you interpret the data in the reports to inform your decision-making to accomplish district goals? And Mr. Leonard, feel free to come off mute and ask your question, get into the details of your point.
Yes. I mean, right now we're going through this, the data and bringing up the reports, but once we do that, my concern is taking this back to my district and district directors and saying, hey, we need to, for example, we may need to change direction on what we're doing within our district to make sure that we meet our goals. And so I need to actually be able to understand beyond the numbers which we have already, on what we're doing and how many acres are treated and that type of thing. To actually jumping to the next level as a director and putting something in front of our managers and our staff and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do over the next couple of years. We've got to change some of our documents and change some of our work. So that's what I'm getting at. It is. I'm sure that if I was into the system, I'd have to play with it for quite a while, just from what I'm seeing now, to actually pull the data together that I need to be able to do that. So as you go through here, I would really like to have some comments from the people that have used this to actually direct their districts, so that I can bring forth things to our own board of directors, so we can make sure that we meet 2005 goals, or if we don't meet, we don't look like we're meeting, to actually bring forth something to maybe our representatives to actually get more funding or change something that we're doing with the county. I mean, there's a lot of things I can see in the back of my mind right now, just from this data that we might need to do. So I'd appreciate if we could do that. I know these data tools are important to me, but not only as something to like add up our work, but also to actually inform that work. So that's what I'm getting at. I hope that helps.
Yeah. I don't have any answers. I don't know how to use CAST. So this is something that I'm learning about today as well. But I mean, looking at what we're learning and how this has been so effective for a district like Colonial and others, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for us to dig into this deeper, even as an agency, and help pull some of this data and help use this information to guide our goals for our program. And as we, and work with each district to help align those goals to meet these numbers that CAST is giving us. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And it's certainly something that we'll explore. I think it's a great tool.
So Wayne, I agree. And I think that's really well said. Wayne, how did your district, after meeting and reviewing, is it really just information to ensure you're on the right path, or did y'all make how did you use it to inform your next steps?
We used it two different ways right now. One, a couple of the practices were not even, I'd say, practical for us, even though they were there in the beginning. Either an operation has gone out of business, i.e., I'm just going to make this up, say if it was a swine operation, but that person, he or she, is going out of business. So, we have to go to another suite of BMPs. And then, as I mentioned, in our case, we could see where in some areas we might have been a little bit not as pleased with the participation, maybe with some of the structural practices. So maybe we need to kind of punt and reevaluate and then go back and say, okay, but we are doing this. We've got more in this category than what the goal was. So we're going to keep pushing that because we are meeting or exceeding that particular goal. So that's kind of where we're going to continue to push and promote the practices that are best received by the producers. But at the same time, we've got this report or this tool right here kind of as our gauge to kind of keeping us in line. And if we need to make changes, we'll do it on the go.
And I think too, truthfully, some of this is a reminder for us and for district staff too about some practices that maybe just we haven't pushed for a while, or
Right.
we haven't, like, almost like we've forgotten about them. We have a lot of practices in our program, and there are some that get utilized consistently, you know, and there are best sellers, but then there are some where it's like, oh, we do actually have something that could meet the need of this producer. I haven't used it in 5 years, or it's been updated recently and I've kind of not been as familiar with it. It's a good, honestly, it's a good reminder of something that, oh, we may be able to fill this gap as well. So I think there's just so many different opportunities with this system and with this data that we can utilize.
Absolutely. Ariana, from the data standpoint and someone that's not as close to knowing districts, do you have anything to add to that question as you walk through this too?
Not really. Yeah, I look at it from a data integrity standpoint. We're just ingesting data from the districts in DCR and
Sure.
making sure EPA gets all of the information that you provide. That's how I fit into all of this.
Ariana, could you show them how to, just because the pivot tables are a little bit where I kind of, you know, selecting what needed to go in what box. Could you show them a demonstration of, you know, like 17, 18, 19, and 20, and how to set that table so that the numbers are easy to read?
Absolutely. So here, we're gonna have to generate another report real quick. So this will show you. We're gonna go back to reports. We'll create another loads report. Or would you rather see a Bmp summary report? What would y'all think?
I'm sorry,
Rather see a loads report or a Bmp summary report?
loads report.
Yeah, loads report. All right, cool. So select as many different scenarios as we want. We'll do.
I would just do like 2017 through 2020. Those are the most applicable.
Okay. And do all load sources. Fed versus non-fed. All right, download that report. I'm share my different screen. There we go. All right. I hit stop sharing again. Sorry, that button's right in the middle. Right where I need it to be. There. All right. So this is condensed data so that we didn't have to look at a whole bunch of everything. We're just going to concentrate on the years. So Control A to select all of the data. We don't want to add it to a data model. And look at the geography, the sector, load sources. It's all load sources in one. So nitrogen loading at the edge of tide for 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. So you can just drag and drop, and you can change the orders as much as you want, but it's usually, I usually do left to right. Then go over the columns you're looking at, right click to come down to format cells. You want them as a number. You don't want to look at all those decimal points. Hit OK. And you can see from 2017 your loads, 2018 loads go up a little bit. And then 2020, their current loads are for nitrogen at the edge of tide.
If they wanted to see that, I guess, in my mind, by rows for like the nutrient timing, rate, placement, the cover crop stuff, the residue stuff, how would they set up those rows so that it spelled it out?
That's where you come down to the load source aggregations and look at them by individual load source. Here, I'll run another report real quick. That'll show all those load sources.
She needs to answer that. It's the difference between there's edge of stream and edge of tide, and it's how
Yes.
they model.
So actually, Ariana, if you can speak to that for a moment, you have a question in the chat box that asks if you can explain what the edge of tide and these abbreviations really mean.
The edge of tide is the delivered nitrogen load into the bay. The edge of stream is what is closest to the land. So there's a lot of attenuation that happens from when the loads come off of a field and start heading downstream. And a lot of that nitrogen is absorbed in different aspects. And so we usually are looking at what is the final delivered load to the bay. And that's what edge of tide means. Edge of stream is just after the edge of field. This is model speak that many people may not really need to know.
So if they want to look at the values and compare it to the WIP3 official goals, then they would want to use tide, because that's kind of what what everybody's looking at is the edge of tide for the Bay TMDL.
Yes, yes. I'm gonna show the source fed versus non-fed. Can you all see the slew of? So we're gonna look at geography and load source. So this is all of your different BMP types. We can break it out into sector if you want. Tends to be a little easier to look at sometimes. (2017), 2018. (2020) progress. Okay. And I didn't put WIP3 in here, but if you want to always put WIP3 in, then that's another scenario, and you would just add that column at the end so that you can see your goals. So yeah, you can see how ag open space loading changes through time. And these are the sum of nitrogen loads in pounds delivered to the bay. So that's your total loading rate that's coming out of, or that's the total loading that's coming out of this type of land cover. Any other questions?
I can see you've got a couple comments in the chat box. I can see how this feels overwhelming. CAST certainly has that ability to overwhelm us, especially with data. And I see the comment in there about information overload. And you're right, you can certainly look directly and concentrate on 2019 and 2020. Get your feet wet with a little bit of it before going maybe all in. And certainly know, as Wayne and Amy and Ariana have said, that if your district is interested and you need help, there are plenty of resources to help you from getting overwhelmed and from that information overload.
Let's go ahead and look at some of the resources that CAST provides. So there's a learning center associated with CAST, and that is honestly how I learned how to do all of this stuff, is between reading manual after manual and watching their training videos. They are fantastic. So start with CAST 101. Olivia goes through all of the basics, and there's 12 videos. Most of them average around an hour, and she goes into how to understand the different scenarios, understanding your submitted versus credited BMP reports. And they're also creating more of these training videos. Like the last one that they did was on February 17th, and it was about the stream restoration calculator that they've created. Fantastic video. And I recommend going through these videos to better acclimate yourself to CAST and the overwhelming amount of data and information that is contained in here. If we look at the user documentation, it's set up in a really, I find it user-friendly, but I think at first I didn't. But again, I've been using it for so long. So we can look at public reports, and it just jumps down to whichever section you want to look at. One of the extremely helpful things in CAST is if you'll always notice this view documentation button on every screen. You click on it and it'll open another screen and take you directly to that portion of the user documents. And if you run into something that you can't figure out about CAST or have problems, the contact us box is fantastic. Olivia will get back to you really quick with all the answers that you could need. She's a fantastic resource.
In addition to all those great training videos that she shared on CAST, I don't want you to forget that if you registered this morning, you received a handout from me. We'll send it again when we send out the video of this training. I honestly find Ariana's PowerPoint that we had attached in your earlier email incredibly helpful, because I'm the type of learner that thinks this is great. I watched her click all of that. I'm not sure exactly how to be able to pull this myself. She has screenshotted every component of the process, shown you, circled which reports and metadata to capture, and will walk you through in those 20 slides exactly how to pull the report itself for your district. So while those training videos are great, that PowerPoint is going to be, I really think, one of your go-to resources as you try to work to figure out how to make this handy for your own district's use. We have a couple more questions in the chat box. So to understand the load reports in the previous table, it's reporting the progress in the year. Is this data showing the total loads at the edge of tide from the given land source or the reduction value?
It's from the given land source.
Okay. Jason,
Yeah, that's not a reduction value at all. It is the loads in pounds from that load source.
Excellent question. Jason, if you need more, perfect. Feel free to come off mute. I don't necessarily need to be handling the chat box. We're a manageable crowd if you want to ask Ariana your questions directly, but there is another really good one in there, and we've talked about this one plenty. When will the 2021 data be available in CAST, Ariana?
That's ongoing discussions. We're looking at late March, early April currently.
Recognize and appreciate those of you who joined this morning. CAST can seem overwhelming and daunting, especially if you don't use it, but so often, but really have tried to at least show you the value of some of the data, how it can help and benefit your district, and try to break it down in multiple ways, be it Ariana walking you through how to pull it this morning, as well as pulling together a step-by-step guide in that PowerPoint so that it still feels doable for you to tackle for your own district. Happy to answer any other questions. Comments from our speakers?
Kim, I have a comment. I'd like to ask the group that's participating on this call, would there be any interest from y'all, big picture, where we are when we meet in Roanoke at the annual meeting? Would that be any interest in either DCR, combination DEQ, providing us a snapshot where we are, big picture collectively of all the district as it relates to the 2025 goals, and kind of dive into it a little bit? And, you know, we're fortunate we've got James on board now, and to me, he would probably be the most appropriate person to give his presentation, but I'd like to hear from the people on this call. Would there be an interest in diving into this a little bit more big picture?
Sure, I'd love to hear from folks on the Zoom, whether or not that might be helpful. I see a couple head nods, a yes in the chat box. I do also know for folks who maybe want to stay on, may do one more example. Repetition is helpful. So if you wanted to stay on and see Ariana do it one more time, I might be able to convince her. She was going to give us a little bit more time past 11 o'clock if folks needed it. I see yes, big picture at annual meeting. Another yes from Pam Mason and Charles. So Wayne, I think absolutely up-to-date reports would be brilliant. I like the idea of a big picture snapshot. I think as we start annual meeting planning, that's absolutely something.
We're fortunate, you know, we've got Blair and Amy here, and they can help us with that, and we'll make sure that we include everything that this group and others want in that presentation.
I have another more direct question, Ariana, I hope you can help answer. Or Jason, feel free to come off mute if you can and want to ask directly. He posted in the chat box, is there a way to show the edge of tide load data to create a comparative analysis of BMP effectiveness? Basically, can I see what loads are coming from scenario A, and based on these BMPs implemented, there is a reduction value of A?
So that's where you get into the like unit area loads report. And can you still see my cast screen?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, so this is your loads per unit area. And you would have to get a couple different scenarios going, but this will tell you the loading rate per land use. And then you would, let me think. Yeah, so you're going to want to do the loads per unit area, aggregate it by, sorry, that was my dog. Aggregate it by load source so that you can see all of the various load sources. Then you would be able to find the percentage for that scenario through time, because you can load all of the different scenarios that you want. So you can watch as that load per unit changes and progresses through time. And then you would also be able to see through the loads report your reductions through time. I hope that answers your question.
I think I've caught most of the questions in the chat box,
Okay.
but stop me if
Okay.
there you go. Jason says
Yeah,
yes.
awesome. Yeah, Jason, if you want to like email or chat later, feel free to email me. My contact information's the last, I think the last slide in that massive slide deck I sent.
Any other questions? Folks feel like this could be a help to their district planning? Well, I know it might still be a bit daunting, at least a little bit more manageable.
Is Pam still on?
I believe Miss Mason is still on. She's been chatting in the chat box for me, Wayne, if you, yes,
I
there
was
she is.
just wondering if, Pam, if you had any additional comments or suggestions. I know you were very involved at Colonial with this process, and we certainly value your input. Anything you'd like to say on where you think we could go to help districts get to where they need to go?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And I think this was super helpful. I think this was a great idea to get this out there and sort of start kind of pointing out that even though CAST is this huge system with lots and lots and lots of data, that if you start picking it apart and looking at what you're most interested in, you can get that information. And then there's people that are willing to help us figure it out, which is great, right? So I like that last question, sort of figuring about the loads by sector and the variability. I also think it's interesting, and one thing that's important to recognize is that, you know, there's certain things that occur at regional levels and state levels, but each district and then each practice within each district, you know, that there's a ton of variability, and as was pointed out earlier, and there's a lot of practices. And so like when you mentioned, Wayne, that if you had sort of potentially targeted one, you know, implementing one practice, but it was linked to a certain kind of production, and that production is no longer in your district, well, information like this is really helpful for us to be able to modify our approach. In other words, sort of adapt to what's going on. And I think that that's really the most helpful element of it, is just it gives everybody an understanding of what it looks like. You know, when you're running around and you have, like, well, we have a fairly big district, they vary by size, but, you know, when you've got your conservation technicians running around, driving around and doing all this stuff, like, what does that end up looking like? And what is that data? You know, once you aggregate it up, what does it look like? And I think it's helpful, and it gives people a sense of where they are and where they would like to go. So that's all I would add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. I think that's a really good snapshot of how your district helped it too. I'm going to take a second to share this because I think it is going to be for a lot of you who keep saying, I think I might be able to do this, could use another run through of how repetition helps. This attachment you're seeing on your screen now is one that Ariana spent a lot of time to develop specifically for districts to do CAST reports. And it is 48 slides of screenshots to get you through how to actually, from login to results menu. I can't go into how much detail. When you hit the reports icon, you'll be brought to this page. She tries to put a little humor in it for you too. So as you start working to really pull your own report, use this specifically to help get you there. Likewise, the very last slide I'll put up for you is Ariana's contact information. Like many of us have said, you have a lot of different resources. I see a few folks in the chat box asking questions. Nice to know, glad there are education videos available. This will be a good addition to our long-term planning and showing our counties extra results from our work. Thank you for the time, absolutely. I'm hoping this is just the start of the conversation today, that you've gotten your feet wet and can really figure out how this matters more to your district. Ariana, there's a really good question in here too. If your district is not within the Chesapeake Bay area, is the data available?
No, this is for Bay stuff. Yeah, CAST it's all inside or outside the Bay. And for soil and water conservation districts, it's only the portion that's in the Bay. Because I know some of them are inside and outside, but the outside portion is not included in the calculations for these data.
And Ariana, I just got a direct question too. I think you and I had chatted about this a little bit. Would we be able to see our VCAP data? Is this bigger perspective than just our ag BMPs? You heard Amy talk a little bit like you'd be getting oyster data and all too, but if you can talk a little bit about how CAST, the data that it's pulling from.
So CAST is technically pulling from NEAN. So all of the BMP data that is reported to DEQ then gets sent to NEAN, which is the EPA database. And a lot of the directly identifying data for individual BMPs is removed along the way. So you end up seeing the BMP type and the amounts for that BMP. And you're gonna, in order to look at that, you're gonna wanna look at the Bmp submitted versus credited report, which is one of the other many reports, and it's built the exact same way as the loads report. The data looks a little different, but you generate the report exactly the same way through the same steps.
And I can talk a bit to VCAP reporting or looking at VCAP loads. I've done a bit of work on that last year. It's entirely different from how this kind of data is pulled. If I was doing it correctly, I was kind of inputting my own BMPs and looking at it differently. So it wasn't quite pulling from their data. It was inputting our own and then comparing it over the years, if that helps anyone. We can certainly talk more about that in the future. But.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maura. And Pam, a good comment. Also, living shorelines is a good example that you noted in the chat box in terms of issues and how NEAN is set up. Folks, stay tuned for a recording of the video, the PowerPoint I shared with you that screenshots you how to do it for your own report, and certainly can share the slides and data that Amy prepared so you can see how Colonial used the information also. We'll be sending that out within the next day once we get the video loaded. It'll be on our YouTube page. I am willing to stay on the line a little bit longer, but I know we're right at the 11 o'clock hour and you've given us an hour of your time already. So if you have any questions specifically for your own district reports that you might want to pull, or questions for Ariana or Amy, even Wayne, who did some of this for Colonial Soil and Water District, we'll stay on the line so we can answer those directly for you, but don't hesitate to reach out to any of the resources that we've shared today and we can help you with your own local district effort. I hope this is just the start of the conversation for you to realize the data that's out there and available for you to help with some of your decision-making processes. All right, thank you guys for joining. I believe I've caught all the questions in the chat box, but if you're staying on and want to come off mute, by all means, please do so. Talk to Ariana, Amy, Blair, any of us directly.
Ariana, this is Amy. I sent you an email of the table or something similar that I presented to Colonial.
Okay.
You could take a look at that and how they would run the report and pivot table so it looks like that, because I think that was kind of what the question is. That's an easier way to track like the nitrogen, bulk of cover crops. And that way I can, when I send out, or when Kendall sends out those slides with the tables, like, you know, kind of that was used, they can make it so it looks like that easily.
Okay, yeah, that's the Bmp Summary Report.
Mhm.
Let me close out every other one that I have except for, there we go. Share screen. So this is the one that we ran this morning.
Mhm.
That, and the Bmp Summary Report comes out looking almost exactly the same. I just have 2020 progress and WIP 3. Then I will show the one you just sent. And there. Okay, you should be seeing that. So you just have like a few more years added in.
Uh-huh.
I wish I could show 2 different Excel screens at the same time, but yeah, so this is just the Bmp Summary Report. I will show you how to run one of those again.
Because I think this format would be very easy to tie back to nutrient management planning, CCI C&Ts for tillage, various cover crops. I think that can be more easily directly related to a VAX practice.
Yeah.
So this is Pam. I'm going to jump in with a crazy idea. Since it doesn't really take that long to run those, is there any way to do one for each and just give it to them?
Yeah, Pam, yes, but I think we wanted to teach folks how to get in there and run them.
Sure, right.
So
Right.
if they want to show progress, if they wanted to show just for the year, if they wanted to show where they needed to get with the loadings versus the BMPs, at least to get folks, you know,
Comfortable with it. Yeah, I get it. I get it. But it's a good one, like, because it covers some of the different elements. And like you said, it had the different years and it was kind of a good place to start from. It makes a great example, I think.
Okay. So we just come to select Bmp Summary Report. Enter in your report name. You're going to be at the conservation scale. Select your district. We're going to look at the public available scenarios. If you wanted to look at the whole set of data that I'm usually looking at, I go back to 2002, then hit 2007. 2017 is the midpoint, 2018, 2019, 2020 progress, and then WIP 3. So that's usually the slate of BMPs that are the years that I'm looking at when I want to see a data set through time. Then click Submit Report, come over to the Downloads button. And this is going to take a little while to generate because of all of the years that I ran. But it shouldn't take too super long. This, also gives you kind of a view of how quickly you can do these reports. And you can see, I think this is.
So while we wait for that to load, to what level does DCR, if at all, do they use this data when I'm thinking about like the TAC process, how we make changes to the program. Do we use this data at all to kind of drive that process?
To a degree. So that's kind of what we did with the whole farm approach. You don't know a pilot project works until you can see the benefits of it. And so with the implementation starting in 2019, 2020, 2021, one of the things that we looked at is if this is a pilot project, did it work? And so pulling the reports showed very directly that, yeah, it worked, and it worked really well. And so now it's being expanded out to another handful of districts to see if that benefit was simply based on kind of the area and that the producers are so similar rotations, or if the results can be repeated across a handful of districts or two handfuls. But so yes, and that's where this came in. And that's where I learned, I don't want to deal with CAST. It's a beast. There's people that specialize in that, like Ariana, but pulling the reports was pretty quick. And it was easy to see the changes over time. And that's where we figured it might be helpful if districts could see this too. But it did help with that process. And so we did look at that, and CAST showed its effectiveness. And so we're moving forward closer to a full-on best practice that would be available statewide.
Hi, this is Will. In relation to that question that was just answered, does DCR use any of this to allocate funds, BMP funds to the districts?
No.
So how? Well, maybe that's a different topic then. That I probably should ask somebody else in another venue. But thank you for that.
But the other thing with CAST is that it's only for the Bay, so the other portion of the state's not included.
Right, I understand that, but we have a lot of many of our districts basically are in the Bay watershed.
Mm-hmm.
Any final questions? We'll hang on just a minute or two longer if folks have any additional follow-ups.
Okay, I downloaded that big BMP summary report.
Perfect.
I'll go ahead and share that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the BMP summary report is you don't have to create a pivot table to look at this data. So I didn't create a pivot table. I just went from the README to the summary, and it's all laid out for you, super nice. And you can just expand it and start digging through all of these summarized data points. It doesn't, I think this will be the best report for like a high level look at things, not getting down into the nitty gritty like I live.
And can you, because I know this kind of is not necessarily intuitive, but the Bay WIP numbers is, towards the end, what you have to meet, the WIP 3 official numbers at the end. Can you explain what that is? Because it's not, it's a 75% of your agricultural acres every year to hit that goal. I hope I said that right.
I've never thought about the data this way because I only look at the absolute loading rates of things. I don't believe it's 75% of everything every year. I think it was 75% at 2025. Is what was modeled. Because, yeah, so this you're at 18,674 pounds, and your goal was 20,397 pounds. So you've exceeded the goal at 2020 progress because your loads are below this goal. Does that make sense?
So you don't want to meet the WIP 3 official, you want to be below it.
That would be the best, yes.
What?
I'm
No.
confused now. I don't know. I follow that.
Yeah, I'm confused on that one.
Okay, this is
I was
your
thinking
target.
the WIP 3 official number, yeah.
Is what you have
It
to
was
meet.
neat.
Right. Yeah, that is the goal line. You can exceed that goal
Right.
by having loads that are lower than that goal.
Yeah, that's your maximum allowable, right?
Yes,
PMDL, maximum allowable load.
yes.
So you want to get down to that number or below it. Loads, you want to be below the load.
Oh,
So, sorry, we're thinking in a reverse order.
Okay.
We're talking about the number, like load maximum. We were thinking of like implementation.
yes.
We were on a different page.
Yeah, okay. That clears it up, yeah. I don't look at things implementation wise, sorry.
Yeah. The scientists were talking.
That's why it's a partnership, right? Because that's why the districts need this information because they're the ones doing the implementation.
Yep.
That's right.
And so that's why this
Exactly.
is super, super helpful to be able to give them an understanding of exactly what their contributions and what their efforts are, and how they roll up into working towards this goal together.
Mhm.
Well said.
Yeah, only through teamwork will we ever get there.
Well, that was really helpful, and I appreciate you all setting it up. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, thank you for joining this morning. Any follow-up questions, you know where to find all of us, and stay tuned for the forthcoming email with some additional resources. Have a great Wednesday.